So why are you more realist?
Um, I would say that they're like objective facts about the world, and that you can use those to dictate
Okay,
what.
have you heard of Hume's guillotine?
No, enlighten me.
All right, so basically you can't derive an ought statement from an is statement, which is to say you should do something, right? You know what an ought statement is?
Um,
So is
I-
you have an answer to Hume's guillotine? Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
sure. I think you can give
Sure.
like pretty simple examples of like is like where an ought would follow from an is, right?
Okay, give me an
So
example.
like if it is the case that like it is raining and it is the case that you don't want to be wet,
Wouldn't be like isn't like an objective moral principle, right? And it's kind of the logic, like so
sure.
it's like you're still adding something that like we ought. You're adding the presupposition of we ought to do what we want to do, right? So it's not derived entirely from is statements.
So we ought to do what we want to do. What do you
Yeah,
mean by want?
that's like you're saying if it's raining or whatever,
Mhm.
you're gonna want to like use an umbrella because you don't want to get wet. That's what you said, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So
Okay, sure. So that's not really either that's not a moral statement or you're saying that we ought to do what we want to do.
so I would say I derive my morality from, right, is I would say that I'm a utilitarian, but I kind of root that in like hedonism almost. So it's like almost axiomatic for me that I
Well,
want
what's your
to
basis for
maximize the amount of pleasure.
utilitarianism? Right, so it's axiomatic. So
Right.
you're just basing all this on an axiom. Axioms
Right.
aren't really is statements; they're just things we accept as true,
Right.
usually for the basis of argument.
So what would the alternative be, right?
What do
Is
you
my
mean the
question.
alternative?
So the alternative to like these axioms, right? What would you say is like a better moral system?
I'm not saying that there is one. I'm saying there aren't objective moral systems.
Right. Okay. So
So yeah, that else.
sure. Okay.
Do, do you have another response for Hume's guillotine? I'd love to hear it.
Hold on, let me think about it for a second. So I would say, do you believe that statements can be objectively true?
Depends on what kind of statement. Ought statements? No. Is statements? Yeah. But
Sure.
is statements aren't even
So
propositions.
does that mean that you have like a preference for what is true in reality?
I don't see how that's relevant, so I'm gonna say sure.
Okay. So if you do prefer what is true, right? You prefer the truth, right? No?
Again, that's just because I want it to be the case.
Okay,
I'm just
so
doing
you're
that
saying
because
that
I want it
it
to be the
is.
case.
So you would say it's just as valid to believe and think.
In like a morality sense, in terms of propositions, yeah.
Oh well, I mean, I guess you have a consistent position. I would just
I
like
do.
say that.
It doesn't really
Right?
matter though. It's still entirely consistent.
Sure, I guess.
You're just not making like a societal appeal, which is a fallacy, really.
I mean,
Because you're saying,
I don't
well, you
really
see, the
know. I don't
majority of
really know how to
society
have a
would call this
conversation.
absurd.
I don't really know how to have a conversation with someone who like says it's just as valid or not valid because that's an actual moral like philosophy term.
Well,
but I would say it's
again,
just as reasonable to want to believe the truth as to want to not believe the truth, right? So like I think
well,
that's
yeah, they have the same certain axioms. Maybe it is better to believe what's true, but those axioms are also just being presupposed. In
sure.
terms of like an entirely objective sense, I think some axioms are like more pragmatically viable. But again, that's just something that I want us to succeed. It's all just based on my desire.
If that's what you're like devolving back into of like, well, I don't actually know that it's like objective that we should prefer the truth over what isn't true, right? Then
Well,
like
we don't really have an objective reason, right? We just
yeah,
want it to be the
sure.
case because it's more pragmatically viable.
Sure.
Mhm.
can't really have a conversation with you on that one anymore because
it's just I'm just bringing up like much else
yeah,
and try them at this point.
I almost feel like you don't actually believe what you just said, but I mean,
again, I no, this isn't like entirely true though. Like I'm just saying
okay,
for like humanity to succeed.
Sure. So would you say? So I would say that there are ways to argue for objective morality based on the existence of God or non-existence of a God, right? So I need to know which one of those.
Sure. So you want to go ahead and prove like the existence of God then, because you could say that again, and then you even have to prove that His word would be objective, which isn't the case. Because
well, no, I was
the only thing that I would
God
attach to God is Him being the causation, right?
To know like which arguments I need to use, right? If you already believe in God, then or if you don't believe in God, I could make some arguments for objective morality based on the non-existence of God, right?
I'll play like whatever position you want.
Man, okay. Sure. So, I mean, I guess it comes down to like what you are willing to admit is God then?
All that I immaterial cause.
Sure. So, I mean, if you're already agreeing to that, right, then wouldn't it be if God like causes the universe to be in a certain way, right? Wouldn't that then be the objective basis on which we can derive morality from?
How can you derive again? This just come back to Hume's guillotine, accepting that like God's desire. Own this chair because he made it. Like
no. So what I'm saying is, if you're already accepting that God made the universe, right? He caused everything in the universe to come into being, right? I assume you also accept he has like some degree of control on like how he caused the universe, what the universe is going to do.
Sure, but there's no reason why it ought to be that. It's just like on his desire.
Right. So this God would be the ultimate, the end all be all, right?
No, he was just the creator. I mean, nothing about his word would be like you're presupposing that his word would be objective, which
no.
is
So
like,
it's not his word. It's he is causing certain things to be true about the universe. So if he
so you're saying
causing the universe caused it like objective morals to be true, right?
You want to prove that those exist? And regardless,
that's what I'm trying to do.
Like a proposition is very, very different to something physical. Unless you want to prove that propositions exist, love to watch you do.
What? I don't think I even understand what you're asking.
Okay, so you're saying that like a proposition can be created in the same sense that like a chair could be created or like atoms could be created by like a hypothetical creator, right? I don't think that follows. I don't think propositions have like the same attributes.
I mean,
something physical and objective, like no.
So wait,
propositions
do you
don't
believe
really
in
exist
logic?
in that way.
Do you believe in like the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, like these basic like logical foundations?
Axiom.
You don't know that they actually.
No, they don't exist. Like they don't exist in the same way as like a chair would exist.
Right, but do you think they describe something real about the universe?
No, they describe other propositions.
Okay,
Again,
so,
like laws of logic are almost always referring to propositions, right?
I mean, almost always. I don't know. Like you could argue like the law of identity, like an apple is the same thing as that same apple, right?
Yeah, but the apple's the apple regardless of whether or not we perceive it that way, right? Like, regardless of whether or not we know about the law of identity, the apple's the apple, assuming that there's an objective
Right,
world.
so the law of identity would be describing that the apple is itself.
Not necessarily.
Oh, yeah?
Well,
no,
okay,
necessarily
sure.
that's what that is.
I'll go ahead, I'll give you that, fine.
Okay, so if you believe even like the laws of logic, right? Then would you say that those were also created by this god?
No. Again, you're just saying they're just observations at this point, which sure.
Sure. So do
They're
you believe?
descriptive. They're not
Right,
making any
so
other
do you think
any other
observations?
assumptions.
Do you think
They're not
observations are based in our own minds? Okay.
by definition, yeah.
Do you think our minds are like property? They exist within the universe?
What do you mean by that?
Do you think our minds exist in the brain, or do you think there's some like non-physical thing?
Not sure that matters.
Well, no, it does matter.
If hypothetically, if like there were a mind-body distinction, no, the mind wouldn't exist in the same way that a chair would exist.
Or do I have to
Okay, like you don't. I'll give you that. Sure. Where are you going with this?
Sure. So the brain does exist. It is physical matter in the universe that was created by the same God that created the universe, right?
Sure.
So then this God is responsible for our observations, including the law of identity. The law of
Yeah. Are you
non-contradiction.
saying every observation is true then? Because if he's responsible for all observations and they're true because he made us. I would like to hope you don't.
All observations exist.
No.
No.
Not in that same way. Not their concepts. They're like maybe they're like electrons or whatever in our mind.
Yep.
But then you're just that's just tantamount to like anything else memory then. Like this doesn't really prove much of anything.
So I mean, I think it proves that like the laws of logic, right? That you have agreed to them being observations, and observations are in the mind. The mind is part of the brain. The brain exists in the universe, which was created by God. Therefore, God created these observations. So
yeah, but they're not the same. So that would be to say, the laws of logic. Then, if they were to like physically exist, then how could they just be like materialized in another person's mind?
No, so I'm not saying that they physically exist.
Okay, but then they don't. Then I didn't say that they didn't exist. I just said that. I never said that they didn't exist. I just said that they didn't exist in the same way that anything physical does.
No, I'm not saying that they. So when I hear someone say like exist physically, that's what I mean by exist, right?
I just said that they don't exist in the same way.
Right. So if they don't exist in the same way, I'm not arguing that they exist in the same way as like physical matter, right? Because I think that like.
Distinction then.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then
then
how are you going to
you can root them
thing?
as being observations, right? And then you can root that in like brain chemistry.
In the same way as something physical would exist, which is
No, so I'm specifically saying that they don't exist in the same way. Able to link that around to showing that God is able to create those as well.
No, and anyway, even if you were to create them, it's just the same thing. Like, there's no reason why they ought to be that way.
Well,
you're just like adding attributes that are sort of irrelevant.
So you were arguing before that there's no reason to believe that God, just because He created like the physical matter in the universe, that doesn't mean that He
there's no
create
reason why like
or anything, right?
No, I didn't say that. There's just no reason why it'd be objective just by virtue of Him creating.
So if they exist, then they are like. Then
it doesn't matter. They like again. There's no reason why they would be objective by virtue of Him creating them.
I mean, wait. So what do you mean by objective? So, I feel like we're talking past each other then.
So something that. Like, do you not understand the concept of truth, or?
So.
Like, for example, there is a desk in my room. Like, that would be a true state.
Yep.
Be true in the same way.
So, I mean, the universe exists, you would say, in this scenario where God created the universe. It's true.
Sure.
The law of identity, if we go down that whole chain again, you would say it's true? Or that the universe is true? No?
Well, the law of identity isn't a proposition, it's an observation.
Right.
It's not the same thing as like murder is wrong, right?
Right.
Again,
you can get from the laws of logic
saying the apple is
exists to moral propositions or no?
proposing that something that is abiding by the laws of logic ought be believed.
Okay. I'm pretty comfortable accepting that axiom. And if you want to push
Okay,
back
again,
on
it's
that,
just an axiom.
sure.
Again, it's just
I mean,
it's still something that you're
if
just
you
accepting.
want to argue against like the laws of logic or things, okay, then I mean, I guess that's
like
that.
again, there's no like actual reason there should be.
I feel like that's going to be a really boring argument. Like neither of us can make any. I'm really not interested in like having an argument with. I mean, I don't know how to have a conversation with someone who doesn't know if they should believe in
Epistemology's
logic.
fun, right, guys?
It really is. God, I hate it. This is why I stick with politics. Jesus.
At least